Hello everybody, welcome to another Transport Evolved live stream. We were going to make a scripted video today, and then we had a chat and we realized that there's been something that's been going on over the last couple of weeks, last couple of days, that warrants a live stream because we want you to be able to ask questions as we're going along in order to make sure that that we cover it in a way that you feel explains things as best as it's possible to do. And we are, of course, talking about the latest in the long line, the saga that is the Chevrolet Bolt battery fire and the battery fire update. Welcome along if you are watching to everybody. We've got a chat room that's already getting a fair number of people in. So if you're watching, hello, feel free to post a comment. Super chats are active if you're watching this on YouTube. And so you can send us a tip if you'd like to help support the channel. But if you'd rather do it a different way, you can support us by going to patreon.com/Transport Evolved. And if you go there, you will get to see the wonderful number of people who are supporting the channel. You can become one of those supporters yourself, and you can help us ensure that we can grow, cover our CES coverage. We've just booked our residents for CES this year. We've just been told our studio number, so we're very excited for that. But trips like that, of course, do cost money, and any support you can give will be greatly received. Joining me today in the virtual studio is the one, the only Winter Tashlin. Hello, Winter.
Hey, Nikki.
How are you?
I crashed my motorcycle yesterday for the first time ever, but I'm doing okay. I'm a little annoyed about having to buy all new gear, but the gear did its job, so I'm all right.
Good, good. And you were able to safely get your motorcycle back home. You were able to safely repair yourself, hopefully. You said you scratched your knee.
Yeah, the jeans I was wearing didn't have the good space for knee armor. The knee armor that was in there didn't work right, and the Kevlar only went so far. So as I slid around the road, eventually it wore through the Kevlar reinforced denim and into the me underneath. But
I'm really sorry to hear that. Was it daytime or nighttime?
It was nighttime. It was about 40 minutes past sunset. And I was on an electric motorcycle, which are notoriously good on torque, and it was on older tires, and I hit a patch of, I think, either oil or water, probably a tiny patch of oil. I was in an industrial area, and just, whoop, bike went right out from under me, and yeah.
Oh my goodness, I am so sorry to hear that. I was driving back from Seattle yesterday. I actually had a weekend off. I was up at a convention in Seattle. Hello, if you were at Anthro Northwest, it was great to see you. I realized while I was there that a lot of people don't know who I am out of costume, which was both funny but also quite telling. So I had a bit of a conversation with people who are like, "Oh, you are Queenie." Yes, I am. And that was an interesting lesson for me to learn, that sometimes people don't recognize you in different forms of life. I did have one person come up to me afterwards and go, "Transport Evolved." I'm like, "Yes, that is me." And they went, "Aren't you also?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am." So hello if you were that person. Unfortunately, it will be my last year at that convention because he found out yesterday that the convention is now taking place on a different weekend. That is CES 2023, not 2022.
Well, let's see how great CES is this year. Maybe we shift some of our focus some years, maybe alternate CES years on and off, so that, because you're not the only member of the team, from my understanding, who normally does that event. So
that is true. There are going to be several people on the team who are going to be doing that in the future. So it's going to be interesting. Hey, Winter, be careful. Love 10 family. We love the 10 family too. Very excited. I'm keeping my hands off the desk because I'm standing up right now. And if I move on the desk, apparently it makes the microphone do things. But we're not here to talk about what we got up to at the weekend. We are here to talk about the news in the world of the Chevrolet Bolt. And I think it's pretty telling to see what's going on in the chat room already. This is from Dave. Yes, we need to know what the so-called leaders of the EV revolution are doing. LOL. Now we've been having some tough conversations in the Transport Evolved work chat about some of the comments that were made last week by President Biden when he went to Factory Zero and he was giving a speech there. Mary Barra was there and he was crediting GM. The way he said it, it almost implied that GM was the only car company working on electric vehicles.
No, don't almost. Don't almost. That is absolutely what he implied. Except we know that he also likes Ford. And then Kamala Harris today, just a few minutes ago on Twitter.
Yeah.
Very much. Kamala Harris's tweet on Twitter was terrible in this regard. Like just pretending Tesla doesn't exist, which is ridiculous. And they're an American automaker.
And we're not going to spend a huge amount of time discussing the politics of this because, as my wife said, who's also in the Transport Evolved chat, they're playing a game of politics. They're just trying to keep the unions happy. And they seem to think it's okay to upset Tesla and Tesla owners in order to keep the unions happy. And it's a game of politics at the end of the day. But what is really telling about all of that is I don't expect any less from politicians to play those kind of games. But I think what it does tell me is that the current administration is pro-EV as long as they can politically make the metaphorical hay from it. The question is, why hasn't someone tried to broker a peace deal between Elon Musk and Tesla, between Elon Musk and the administration? I suspect nobody has tried. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but to everybody watching, we are trying to find out. We do have some contacts, and we are trying to do proper journalism about this rather than just knee-jerk reactions. And so we got a lot of criticism on Saturday's show when we said, President Biden was there. He was very excited to drive the truck. And people said, well, you didn't mention what he said. And you're trying to kill Tesla. And someone accused us of being GM's mouthpiece. And we're like, no. The news story was that he was there and rode in the truck. And we acknowledge, and we've not acknowledged many, many times in the past, that there's no love lost between Tesla, mainstream automakers, and the Biden administration when it comes to EVs. So,
but Nikki, I think we also have to acknowledge that we focus on Tesla because Tesla is this massive automaker. But if you just go by market cap, which for the record, I don't think you should do, but if you just go by market cap, Rivian is now an absurdly valuable and important electric American automaker, which Biden also hasn't talked about. He hasn't talked about Rivian. He hasn't talked about Lucid. He only wants to talk about the big three
with the unions, and I think
only in the context of unions. And
I think that comes in a lot of ways.
It comes back to this thing that Biden said, which we talked in the work chat about being really product, where he said, "When I think climate change, I think jobs." And it's funny because when I think climate change, I think a planet on fire. That's more my immediate takeaway. And I think that really reflects that the administration sees all these issues around climate change solely through the lens of business electoral politics. And as a consequence, they're uninterested in automakers that aren't doing anything for them. That's what it feels like. And that feels cynical to me, like to say. But electorally, they need the unions. That's really important. And democratic politics and unions are deeply intertwined. I get all that. But like Kamala Harris's tweet today about how we're going to make EV manufacturing an American thing is ridiculous when Rivian and Tesla are both very valuable EV manufacturers based in America. And also Lucid Motors exists.
I think what they need to do is sit down and think a little bit more carefully about phrasing, because all the things that have been said could be very easily fixed. For example, we want to focus on a huge number of American jobs, and these companies are poised to give the most number of jobs to people and to give jobs in the way that we feel is appropriate. There are other companies, they're welcome to join in. That would be a really great way of doing it.
See, I think that's where you and I differ, because I think you see this as a mistake of messaging, and I see this as a very deliberate messaging strategy that I just don't like. I don't think they're making errors.
I like to see the best in people if I can. I'm often proven wrong. What I will say is that I don't want this to be 100% about politics, and lots of people have gone straight in the comments about politics. We only brought it up because someone immediately made that comment, and I want people to know
because we're talking about GM. I mean, we're talking about GM and GM electric vehicles.
But the thing that really upsets me about this whole thing right now, and it's the Biden administration is partly to blame. Other groups of people are also to blame. It is the cluster you-know-what of people talking past each other, people not being willing to work together, people ignoring each other, and people trying to buy favor and curry favor. And what we've got right now is we've got a very dangerous precedent where a lot of people who said that they were politically left-leaning are now going, well, I'm not giving any support to this administration because they've hurt my favorite automaker, or they're ignoring my favorite automaker. People have, I'm reading the comments right now, and there are some comments that I'm not going to, because they're offensive, frankly.
Trillion-dollar companies will never love you back. I'm sorry. Right. Love the car. We really like my family's Model 3. But
they won't. But people are irrational. We talked about this in your video, right? Your buying video, and you're talking about what car do you buy next. People are irrational. We are irrational. And I think that we do think that, I think a lot of people do think, for example, that Elon loves them, or that this particular company loves them. Apple loves them because they've always got my back or whatever. And I think it speaks to modern society and how we've got so obsessed about brand and brand image, but also we need to be willing to sort of say to people, come on. The thing that frustrates me is we need to say to people, we need people to work together to solve this problem. And I know that the original goal of Tesla, the original goal of Elon Musk was to do that. And I think Tesla is still doing that. I think it is very disingenuous for other companies and the government to step in and go, we're going to fix it, because someone is already trying to. Now, we can talk about the fact that Tesla hasn't made an affordable EV yet. We can talk about the fact that Tesla's technology isn't. Personally, I don't think Tesla is focusing on the right thing. It's focusing on fancy cars that can drive themselves rather than affordable cars for everybody around the world. But there are plenty of other companies around the world that are also doing the same thing in different ways. And I think that ignoring the impact and the fantastic effect that Tesla has had on the world is very disingenuous and very dangerous. And frankly, I would like to see Elon at the White House alongside Mary Barra, alongside the CEOs of Ford and Stellantis, and alongside the CEOs of Lucid and Rivian. Because if all of those CEOs came together at the same place at the same time and actually said to the administration, look, we need to make electric cars affordable and accessible for everybody, then we will actually solve this freaking problem that we face. Right now, I don't feel that we have the capability to do that because we're so focused on, the politics of it rather than the actual doing. And you and I have had this conversation before about we just need to do the thing. And I think that's where we're at. And I think it's very dangerous when we put one company on a pedestal, but at the same time, it's very dangerous when we ignore the impact of a company. I would much rather have an even playing field for all. Someone had a couple of things here before we actually get to the meat of the matter, which is the Bolt. Remember, if you want to support the channel, you can do. You can send us a super chat and we'll read it out as long as it's family friendly. You can also support us through patreon.com/Transport Evolved. This desk behind me that's a bit messy right now, that's why I'm standing here, is going to be occupied by our new cameraman, whose name is Michael. I can actually say his name now because he's given his notice at his old job. I couldn't say that for a couple of weeks, but now I can tell you about him. Michael is a fantastic videographer. He has worked with us as effectively as a casual person, casual employee. He's worked for us at the weekends and he's helped us out with some video stuff, but he's going to become a full-time member of staff. He has the most amazing storytelling. He's worked and made some amazing videos in the past. One of his first videos was about BMX. He did a BMX stunt video, which is truly amazing. And he's been working. He's been working hard to get to this point where he can start doing this full time. So we're really glad to have him on the team. Thank you very much, Mark. You are a gent. Thank you very much. Lots of things people are talking about in terms of bubbles and all kinds of other things. I'm going to let that go. But I do want to reiterate that we were not ignoring what the Biden administration said. In fact, we were trying to steer clear of it because we are often accused of getting too deep in politics. And I find it kind of amusing that when we do get into politics, people get very angry. When we stay out of something, people then also get angry that we're staying.
I mean, that is sort of the reality of doing what we do, is that no matter what we say or do, some people are going to be unhappy about it. And they're going to be very, very, they will take great joy in expressing their unhappiness on the internet.
Winter, apparently you sound very American today.
Yeah, no, I was really clear when I did. So for people who remember my very first video for Transport Evolve, this is what I sounded like. I did a video about Ducati announcing they're backing off on making EV motorcycles in favor of e-fuels, which I went into great detail about in my garage. And I sounded like this because I have Tourette syndrome, and the speech atypicality tic, which sounds kind of like a UK accent, comes and goes in, like anywhere from 6 to 18 month cycles. And when I recorded that video, my husband handled the camera for it, and he said, I can hear that your accent's starting to come back, because the way I was stumbling over some of my words. And then by the time I did my second video for Transport Evolved, I sounded like a British person, which was really funny since Nikki and Kate are, actually British.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not. I grew up in Massachusetts. And I did a video for Take Two explaining it. And I said at the time that eventually I was going to sound like this again. Whether or not I'm going to consistently sound like this, the next few months, next probably 2 months, I'm guessing will be a transitionary period where sometimes I'll sound more British and sometimes I'll sound more American. And then I'll probably go back to sounding just like this for a while.
And it's been interesting because we were on a road trip recently and I picked up on your accent shift. I said, I think your tic's changing. And you were like, yep.
Yeah. No, and also I've been more barky than usual. I tend to bark more when I don't have the accent tick. For whatever reason. Ticks waxing and waning, and ticks coming and going, and ticks changing in intensity, ticks changing in nature, some ticks going, new ticks showing up. That's all part of what having Tourette is like.
Yep. And it's a very misunderstood condition. It's very frustrating for its sufferers. And while you might think it might be cool to sound like a British person one day and an American person the next, it really does.
Although, as I'm fond of saying, I've never been kicked out of a restaurant or denied access to boarding an aircraft because I sounded like a British person. I have definitely been kicked out of restaurants because I was barking like a dog, and I've been denied boarding to an aircraft because I was barking like a dog. So in the scheme of unpleasant ticks, but I mean, I broke my neck from a neck jerking tick. So in the scheme of things, almost all of them are less annoying than that.
And people are asking, completely unrelated, Michael says, when will Nikki have an American accent?
Nikki gets
an American accent.
Nikki sounds much more American when she's in casual conversations with Americans. Yeah. If you watch really early Transport Evolved, in early Transport Evolved videos, she had an RP accent. And
do you think I do not have it anymore?
No, I don't think you have an RP accent most of the time. Even when you're presenting, you're not RP in the way that, like, when you did radio stuff was hard RP. And like when Nikki is presenting, she still sounds much more British than she does when she's talking.
Yeah,
where her accent softens a lot. Kate Walton Elliott, who also presents Transport Evolved, that is not the case. Kate sounds as British sitting in a car with you as she does when she's in front of a camera.
Right.
Nikki, that's not the case.
No, I am a vocal chameleon, which is very different to what Winter suffers. And a vocal chameleon is someone whose accent changes based on whom they're talking to. And lots of people have researched it, and it seems to be something to do with wanting to fit in and subconsciously wanting to fit in or make the other person feel at ease. I'm married to an American. I have been for a long time. I am also, my mum is Canadian. And so my mum used words with a British accent despite being a Canadian when I was a kid. So I was already used to North American vocabulary. And I went to music and drama school, so I learned how to act and how to perform. And when you see me on camera, what you're seeing is you're seeing a performance. You're not seeing what I'm actually like off camera. But I have just spent an entire weekend doing voiceover panels and performance panels at a convention where I've been teaching people, how to sound like this, dear, and how to be very, 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 hello, darling, how are you? And so that voice came that voice has influenced, I suppose, my auditory system and my vocal production today.
Anyway, we should dig into the bolt.
About the bolt. All right. So tail end of last week, Chevrolet said, we've got a new update for you regarding the Chevrolet Bolt EV. We've got a new piece of software that we will program your car with, your car's battery management system, and it will allow you to gain access to your car's low-end state of charge. And it will allow you to park indoors again. You'll be able to charge indoors again. You'll be able to charge at night. You'll be able to go in a parking garage. You'll be able to go in a parking garage because I'm pretty convinced that many garages will just say no. You come to a dealer. Your dealer will program it. You'll be able to go home. It also includes a subroutine that allows us to better detect problems with the batteries. This sounds familiar. If it sounds familiar, it's because it is. That's what GM did over a year ago. The difference is that now Chevrolet is saying our new update will restrict your car's maximum state of charge to 80%. It will restrict that top 20%. You won't be able to access it. There won't be any hilltop reserve mode. You must get your car will automatically stop charging at 80%, and that will be all you will get. But you'll be able to drive your car until it's right at the bottom of its pack, where it's flashing and it hasn't got any range left. You'll be able to do that. And as Archie says in the chat room, deja vu. It really is deja vu. I don't know why it's not showing. It's being silly. My chat has stopped working, so I'm unable to share with you the chats. But in fact, my mouse has stopped working. Let me see if I can get over to the right.
Technology. Yeah, I mean, I don't even own a Bolt anymore, and I feel like I've seen pretty much this message back when I owned a Bolt.
And the problem with this, unfortunately, is that it means your range is going to be really restricted. And we did see some news outlets incorrectly report that, you'll be able to gain functionality with your car again. This will fix your problem. Unfortunately, that's not true. It will, in fact, make things just the same as it was previously. That's all.
Except you are being allowed to run your battery down in a way that you weren't being allowed to for a while.
Yes, but how many people do you know genuinely feel comfortable going down to that last bit of battery charge? Now, I'm going to admit live on air that I did something stupid this weekend with my Bolt, and had my car caught fire as a consequence, I would have put my hand up and admitted to it. I drove up to this convention in Seattle, and I drove back. Now, when I got to the convention center, my car had been misbehaving on the way up there, and the touchscreen had stopped responding. I couldn't get anything to work. I tried rebooting the car multiple times. I actually put it into a mode I'd never put it into before that's designed for storing the car, and it just made all these kind of lights light up, and I had to figure out how to turn
I
it on.
owned one, and I didn't know that. I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
I tend to dig into stuff. I had no idea that mode existed.
You have to have the hazards on, and then you have to press you have to power button for a certain amount of time. And I'd done that in an attempt to restart the car and do the single finger salute equivalent. Anyway, I researched how to put it back. But when I got to the hotel, it meant that for some reason the car decided it was going to charge to 100%. And it sat there and it charged on Thursday night, Friday morning.
Oh, because you had charging at the hotel?
Right. And so I left yesterday from the convention with a near as damn it 100% fully charged battery pack. And I drove all the way back to my house, and I got home with about 36 miles of range. And that was 180 miles of driving.
Oh, so you didn't have to stop.
I really pushed the battery yesterday, but then I slow trickle charged it last night to get it back to normal. But of course, it means that you're not going to be able to do that if you get this 80% thing. Ray says, I didn't get the first fix, and I'm not getting this one. Now, I'm not going to advocate that you do one thing or another, because I would always err on the caution of saying, and this is not in favor of GM or anybody else, this is in favor of, if a company tells you that it wants you to do something with its product and you do the thing and things go wrong, you can at least then turn around and say, but you told me to. Whereas if you ignore the advice and something happens, they can turn around and say, well, you didn't follow my advice. Is that how you feel about such things, Winter?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I had my Bolt. One of the big reasons we got rid of it was that I didn't have any way to park it, because the garages where I live now are under our apartments, and a bunch of people were like, just park the car in the garage. Like, what are the odds it's going to burn? And it's like, well, it's one of those risk to reward things. Like, the odds on burning are low, but the consequences were very, very high. And one of the things I was really concerned about was that if I parked the car indoors and it burned, after GM had said, do not park it indoors, that I was going to be liable in some way. For having, in terms of, like, my insurance company was going to come back and say, yeah, you were told you couldn't park the car in this place. You parked the car in this place. That's on you, dude. That was my fear. I'm not a lawyer.
Right. And we had that similar conversation recently, because my wife's car developed a steering fault. It was like really low vibration, really, really horrible vibrations at low speed. And there was a lot of clunking, and I drove it, and I'm like, I feel that
it is worth noting that your wife's car has almost 100,000 miles on it.
That is true. That is true. And so she was like, well, we've got a buyback request in process. Should we just wait? Do we need to spend money on this? And I'm like, no, because I think if it's a suspension problem and something is to collapse or something was to go wrong and it was to get worse, our insurance company would turn around and go, you didn't get the car looked at.
Yeah.
And the car company will go, you didn't get the car looked at. We took it to the local dealer. It turned out that the belt was separating on the tire. And there was some tie rods that needed to be replaced.
I thought it was sway bars.
Sway bars, sorry.
Sway bars,
and it was
much easier than tie rods.
$500, and we're back on the road. Now, someone said, if GM said you have to stand on your head while driving, can they say they have no liability if you don't do this? GM can't make unreasonable demands to clear themselves. Take precautions if you want. That is a fair thing. Although, as we've just said, we are not lawyers.
Nope.
So I know some people are getting the update done. I know some people are not getting the update done. And GM hasn't really been that communicative about the update, other than to say, we want you to have this done to the car. Now, at this point, I think a lot of people, and again, I'm not a lawyer, a lot of people who have battery buybacks or sorry, battery buybacks, buyback requests in offer, I think are likely to then be able to turn around to GM and go, well, you've just restricted my car even further, even though that's technically not true. I want a buyback. Disclaimer, Winter had a buyback in process, got fed up and sold it.
So I had a buyback offer made to me. I rejected it because the car was fixed. And then a couple of weeks later, they were like, oh, actually, after I rejected the offer, they were like, actually, the fix didn't work. We've got to re-software lock all the cars. And then I went to GM, was like, look, 3 weeks ago, you said you'd buy back my car. I rejected it because you said my car was fixed. Now you say my car's not fixed. Will you honor the buyback offer? And they said, absolutely not. Start over. I started over. I went a couple of months, and then I found a local used car dealership that specialized in EVs that made me an incredibly aggressive offer, basically a little bit less than GM had, no, about the same actually as what GM had offered me. And I was just like, my husband at that point really wanted us out of the car. We didn't have a place to park it. And we were just like, you know what, we'll just let it go. And then GM like called me multiple times, and I said, like, I don't own the car anymore. And like, oh, we'll note that in your account. We'll close your account. And they called me like 2 months later and said, so do you want to move ahead on this? And I was like, I don't own the car. And they said, oh, we'll note that in your account. And they called me another month after that, and we had the same conversation.
GM has been extremely poor about the buyback. My experience is we put in a buyback request for both cars, and GM said, okay, good, we'll process a buyback. And we made the request for a buyback for both cars at the same time. The first 4 people I dealt with would ring me back and go, we've got an update on your car. We're still working on it. And I go, well, what about the other car? And they go, what other car? I said, we've got 2 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EVs. They're like, no, you don't. Yes, we do. We've given you the information. So then GM didn't contact us for literally months. And then a couple of weeks ago, we got another call from a guy who said, okay, I'm from GM Repurchase. We need to process your paperwork. Can you send us your paperwork, please? And I said, well, we've already sent you the same paperwork 3 times. Do you not have access to it? He said, no, we haven't got it. Great. We sent them the paperwork. And I said, well, what about the other car? And he said, what other car? And I said, we've got 2 cars. Here's the other VIN number. He then rang me later in the day and went, great, I'm taking care of both cars. So at this point, we've gone from 2 different groups of people after we requested a buyback from the same person, 2 different groups of people working on it. And then it morphed back into one person who was asked about 4 times now for the same paperwork. And the last they told us was, oh, it'll be 3 weeks. Now, if any other company did that, I mean, imagine if Tesla did that, right?
Yeah, it would be front page news. I mean, in fairness, it is the sort of thing Tesla would do, because Tesla communication is absolutely terrible.
It's pretty terrible. And I know people who have solar panels who have similar tales of going through Tesla Solar. A friend of mine, literally, it took him over a year to get Tesla to get solar panels on his roof because of a planning issue with the local city. And in the end, the only way he got Tesla to install his solar panels was to read the law for the local planning department, literally make his own plans, say to Tesla's team, here, I think this will work. And the city going, yep, that's fine.
I mean, so there's a comment I want to address, but before we get to that, I want to say I had 2 cars affected by LG Energy battery fires. I had a Chevy Bolt, which was fine, and I had a Hyundai Kona. Well, my husband had a Hyundai Kona EV that we loved. And where things stand now, we don't have any intention in getting out of my husband's Tesla right now, and I drive an old little Think City. But when we talk about cars for the future, based on how we were treated by the 2 companies going through the buyback process, we will not consider a GM product in the near future. And we would consider a Hyundai, because both cars ran into problems with LG Energy having screwed them on bad manufacturing, not even bad cell design, bad manufacturing. But the way Hyundai took care of us and treated us through the whole process made us willing to give the company another chance. And the way GM did made us say, we're out when it comes to GM. So there's a comment here. There have been a number of comments about the infrequency with which bolts catch fire, which I want to touch on for a sec, because there's a lot of, we see every time the bolt fires come up. That isn't the one I was thinking about. First off, let's talk about that for a sec. You buy a car, you should be able to fill it up and drain it. That's, if the gauge goes from 0 to 100, you should be able to go from 0 to 100. We've seen a lot of sort of victim blaming at people who drive bolts, or people like, well, if you drive an EV, you should know better than to fully discharge your car. No, companies build battery buffers into their battery for that reason. If me running my car to full and draining it to empty is going to seriously increase the chance that it's going to burst into flames, then your engineer should have done your buffer differently. Anyway, what I actually want to talk about real quick is the infrequency of bolt fires. So first off, yes, internal combustion cars catch fire more often, full stop. Usually older ones. And one of the major things in internal combustion cars, they tend to catch fire while you're driving them, whereas EVs tend to catch fire when you're not. Leaving that aside for a sec, there have been a lot of, every time this topic comes up, we get a lot of people who say, like, GM is only pushing the buyback because they want to sow some sort of doubt about fear, uncertainty, and doubt about EVs.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous because GM is investing a ton of money into EVs. The other thing people say is, like, it's a numbers game. Very few cars have burned in the scheme of how many have been made. People are just overreacting, and GM is reacting their overreaction. I want to touch on that for a sec.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
this is General Motors we're talking about. And we know General Motors will not do a recall because of public image, because their ignition switches were killing people for years and they didn't recall them. GM is doing this recall because they know from analysis that a significant number of LG Energy batteries have a torn anode and a folded separator. Or do I have that backwards? There's a folded anode and torn separator.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Right.
Anyway, manufacturing defect, not necessarily rather than design defect, although the design of the manufacturing line appears to be relevant since batteries from three different factories experience these problems. GM is spending an enormous amount of money, GM and LG, on this recall campaign. And their image, such as it is when it comes to EVs, has taken an absolute body blow. Companies do not do this sort of thing because they think people want it. Companies do this sort of thing because they think they're in dire legal jeopardy.
Yeah.
GM, yes, not that many bolts have burned. The Bolt is a relatively young car in the scheme of cars. I'm driving an EV that's 10 years old right now. Right. The Bolt is a relatively young car. These problems have increased as Bolts have aged. And GM knows, full stop, more than I'm certain they're telling us, about how frequent these issues are, these manufacturing defects are. I take the Bolt recall really seriously, not because I'm a Chicken Little who loves to throw his arms in the air and go, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I take this really seriously because I think that massive corporations are soulless monsters. And if GM is taking it as seriously as it is, it knows that there's a real risk to this company beyond the incredible financial and reputational damage that it's suffering by doing the recall in the first place.
I would disagree with what John says here. If Tesla burns, it's front page news. If any other EV burns, it's page 2. If an ICE car catches fire, it's a statistic. I haven't seen that. I think we've seen a lot of coverage lately of the Bolt fires. I don't know if we're seeing it necessarily on, blanket, but I think at the end of the day, the number of apartment complexes, parking garages, and other places that are now saying no to bolts tells me that the news is getting out.
And to be clear, I actually think the last part of that is correct. I think that ICE cars do burn all the bloody time, and it very rarely makes the... ICE car fires only make They don't even make local news unless someone gets hurt, because if it bleeds, it leads. As far as just generally ice, we just did a 2,600-mile road trip, and I saw at least 2 burned out ice cars on the side of the road during that trip.
And I think any EV fire is getting attention at the moment. Y'all are whiny babies, lol. GM is replacing batteries. Yes, it is. But it's asking its customers to carry on using those vehicles unless they feel really, really against it. In which case, GM's going, okay, have a gas car for a certain amount of time. But the reality is, I'm hearing from people who are not getting replacement cars.
And yes, American accent, British slang. My ex-husband grew up in the UK, so even before I had the accent tick, I already used a bunch of British words.
Yes. And he also works with 2 Brits.
And I do work with 2 Brits. Yeah, I find that the word properly has made into my like speech way more from working with you. You know, that is properly terrible. That is properly awesome. Yeah, no, properly as a modifier was not a thing I did before working for this company.
Yes. So here we go. This is the situation. So GM has said this is a software update. Do you have to get it done? That's totally up to you. GM has said, come in for your dealership, come have it repaired. But I think this speaks to 3 things that worry me. First of all, it suggests that the batteries are not going to be replaced as quickly as GM might have originally said. I have sent an email
which we all knew. We all knew.
I've sent an email to my contact at GM going, do you have an update on this? And I got back a holiday. I'm on holiday until next week. It was an autoresponder. He wasn't like avoiding me. So that might happen. It also means that GM potentially thinks that this software, I would suggest, needs to stay on the cards for a while until the battery replacements take place. But third, it suggests that the chip shortage is causing all kinds of issues, which brings me to the news today that we learned that GM's Orin facility, it's spelt Orion, but I have it on good authority. It's pronounced Orin. I sometimes do get my pronunciations wrong. I'm sorry when I do. Is being shuttered down temporarily halting production until the new year. And the reason is GM is focusing on batteries. But I suspect the real reason is that GM cannot build enough batteries and LG is not providing it with enough cells to make batteries for the however many 100,000, it was 140,000, I think.
Something like that.
Bolts that have been made to date.
I have told you that I think that I don't personally think it's terribly likely that GM is going to resume bolt manufacturing. And if they do, I don't think they'll do it for all that long, because GM has been incredibly clear that its focus is on Ultium. This
brings me to the news today. So GM is like...
Also, we had a super chat. Today.
Oh, thank you, John. Jim, even. Thank you, Jim. It's amazing that EV ads from the GMIC Daily for vehicles not available. The money spent for the ads should be spent on buyback for current vehicles, and now they're closing EV plants till 22. It is just for Bolt, because batteries, you know...
Bolt is the only EV GM currently sells. That's not going to be that way for much longer.
In North America.
That's true. In North America. They sell a lot of EVs in China.
I mean, in China, the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV is built in partnership with GM, and it's as popular, or I think more popular than a Tesla right now in China.
Yes, it's also $5,000. But yes, it is in terms of like numbers of EVs on the road. Then the top 2 by a massive margin is Tesla and Wuling Hongguang Minis. Like, that's it.
So we're getting some negative feedback now. Do we want to address this, Winter?
I mean, the 737 MAX was fixed. They were grounded for a long time.
Yeah,
and then
18 months?
And then they fixed the MCAS system. I think Boeing should have suffered much more seriously. I think Boeing engineers and executives who kept the damn things in the air even when they knew MCAS was a problem should have gone to jail. I think that the fact that they deliberately hid the MCAS system from pilots, because then they would have to pay for pilot retraining, was absolutely criminal. But yeah, I flew on a 737 Max recently because
We flew
they
on a
were
737
they
Max
were
together.
fixed.
Yeah,
Because they
I
were
remember
fixed.
you said
I wasn't thrilled.
you actually commented to me as we got on the plane. Well, they better have fixed this. Or
Yeah.
something to that effect.
And I said the same thing I say every time I get an airplane, which is that should I die in an airplane crash, I want the person who plays me on air crash investigations to be attractive. But yeah, I mean, I will fly in a 737 Max, and if GM fixed the Bolt and put in a battery pack that actually didn't have manufacturing line defects in it, and I could buy it for a price that wasn't absurd, I would seriously be willing to own a Bolt again someday.
I think the crux of this is GM's mismanaged this.
Yeah.
And then it's been sticking its and then the really horrible thing about it all is that we had this big thing last week with President Biden where he was talking about how GM was leading the world in EVs, or however he phrased it. I don't want to be that was a little bit a bit hyperbole on my part. He was saying, GM is going to be among the companies allowing America to make electric vehicles that will lead the world, or some words to that effect. And there was actually a Bolt there, while all the time GM has changed its messaging so frequently on the Bolts. And the messages there are very, very conflicted, because GM's going, look, we're making the Hummer EV. It moves. The president's driving it. It's great. We're opening the factory. We're going to start producing the Bolt. It's using Ultium. By the way, Cadillac Lyriq, a press release produced today. The Cadillac Lyriq is entering into its final phase of testing. It's going to be great. I'm very convinced that we will see both the Lyriq and the Hummer at CES 2022.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2022.
I'm hoping we can get behind the wheel of one. I am not someone who thinks that Chevy doesn't care about or GM doesn't care about EVs. I just think that GM didn't mention the Bolt once during a 5-hour Investor Day presentation. It was entirely focused on Ultium, which is the company's future. And that's why I think the company is going to wind down. I think they were always going to wind down the Bolt EV and Bolt EV.
And look, it's not just a GM thing, right?
In answer to a question we got, are they going to rename and redesign it? No. The GM is not going to rename and redesign the Bolt. That's not the name Bolt may linger on eventually, but right now the next GM that's really going to fill the niche the Bolt had will be the electric Equinox, which GM has said will be coming. Will have cost about start at 30 grand and should have a 300-mile range. That'll be an Ultium based Equinox.
Sparky Heart says, "How about Sean Austin to play you?"
But yeah, no, I mean, the company is, the Ultium platform is super, super flexible, and the company is very focused on it. Someone else asked if GM would ever partner with, yes, there's stars on her wall. It's very confusing.
Yes, this used to be a nursery. The previous people who owned this house had little people living with them and babies. And so this was the nursery. And so that was, the thing.
But no, in terms of the question of will GM partner with BYD? No, GM has been extremely clear, again, at the Investor Day presentation in response to a question from the media, that they are committed to their partnership with LG Energy. And
that is obviously very concerning too. Concierge told me they're not recommending people get the software since it's a battery issue, says Jonathan French. And this is part of the issue, right? The people who are being trained to work concierge, the people who are working the call center, they haven't got a freaking clue. And that's been reiterated time and time again, because people are saying, people have asked me questions when I phoned up going, well, do you want this? Do you want that? They were happy for me to do a buyback, an MSRP swap. And one person said, we don't do MSRP swaps. And the next person said, oh, we do, but we have to call them this, or it works in this particular way. There doesn't seem to have been any, really good training on the GM folk. And the other thing,
come on, Nikki. GM hasn't done good training on a thing that involves electric vehicles is not news at 11. That's part of the problem.
No, it's not. But you'd think, look, if a company screws up that badly, whether it's their fault or someone else's fault, the first thing that you do is go, as a company CEO, as a tech lead, as a whatever leaders go, we will fix this, we will make this good, and these are the things we're going to do to help you. But what we've had instead is effectively Bolt owners have been guinea pigs for whatever software update is the new hotness. And yes, some people have had their cars, their batteries replaced. I was at a dealership recently and we saw a huge pile of batteries. So we know they're coming.
I'm sorry, that just immediately sounds terribly dangerous given that we're talking about Bolt batteries. But
right. But at the same point, you know,
pile of batteries seems like a real properly bad idea.
If somebody at GM, right, could go, okay, we are looking at this vehicle, it will need a battery replacement at this point. As an owner, if GM had said to me, okay, we're going to have to replace your battery, you're going to have to do this for a while. And it's like back to what you said earlier. You would go back to Hyundai because it treated you well. You wouldn't go back to GM because you felt dicked around. Yeah. And, you know, GM going, the lyrics coming and all these other things are coming is exciting as an EV reporter, as someone who works in the industry, as a car journalist, as someone who is an EV driver herself. I love the idea of more cars coming to market, and I will celebrate each and every one, even if they come from companies who've effed up in the past. As long as they can prove that they are not doing the same for this one. I am very, I've been, you know, quite excited about the Nissan Ariya, despite Nissan screwing up the Leaf. And lest we not single out, in case we just single out one company and you think we're just wailing on one company, every car company out there who produces an electric car, including Tesla, has done dumb stuff in the past that has affected its reputation and affected its future.
And almost no one who makes EVs has gotten by without EVs catching fire. And the ones that have only did so because they were such small volume that there wasn't enough time. I don't know if any car by my car's company ever caught fire. But my company, the company that made my car, made a few thousand cars 10 years ago. So like,
yeah. So
I don't know if any Rivians or Lucids, but they haven't made very many.
Just to be clear, General Motors is replacing the battery packs in its entirety again, which is something that's been really confused because originally GM said we'd just do modules, and then we'll do modules if we need them, and then we'll do modules, and now we'll do packs. So now we will do packs for 2017, 18, and 19. But then some 19s will just get modules, and some 2020s will get modules.
Their messaging has been atrocious, and it has felt throughout like their messaging hasn't been bad because their messaging was bad. It has felt like their messaging has been bad because GM leadership has been unable to decide what to do.
Right.
Like it feels like you said, it feels like as soon as someone has an idea, it gets pushed to the public, and then we'll see how it goes.
But as I was saying earlier, it's not just GM that does this. I think we need to hold all companies equally accountable when they screw up.
So let's be fair. GM in particular has a more recent history than many companies of terribly mismanaging safety issues affecting their cars.
And Ford and Honda and Toyota have all come under. I mean, do you remember the unintended acceleration with the Prius? My goodness,
which mostly turned out not to be true.
But it created a huge amount of stuff.
Well, and everyone who had Takata airbags. This situation reminds me a lot of the Takata airbag recall, which is one of the largest recalls in history. Someone asked me by the other day if my car had a Takata airbag, because that's a real possibility. And I realized that there's really no good way for me to know, because they're like, well, have you gotten a recall on your car? And I was like, a company made my car run out of business a decade ago. I have no idea.
The nice thing that when someone says, why do you think NHTSA exists? Yeah, NHTSA does exist to do that. And people get upset with NHTSA when, whoops, wrong one. Why do you think NHTSA exists? You're chatting so quickly. Every time I look at your thing and I click on it, and then there's another two things. NHTSA exists for this very reason, to make sure that our vehicles are safe. And when people get really upset at NHTSA for having opinions about how Tesla goes about doing things, it's because NHTSA that's its job. Its job is to try and make sure that vehicles are safe and to set guidelines to make sure that automakers follow them. And if a company does something that it feels is unsafe, it will step in. NHTSA has caused problems in the past. NHTSA is one of the reasons we don't have rear view cameras in the United States. But other things, are changed. Nobody said Mary Barrett invented the EV, Ed. Come on. That's hyperbole.
Yeah, no. There was a question about what's going to happen to these battery packs. Are they just going to go in a landfill? We have asked GM. We have not gotten a ton back from what I recall. I think it's unbelievably, vanishingly, almost impossibly unlikely that these batteries are going in a landfill. No. They're not. They do not have second life use because they're damaged. But they'll be recycled because the stuff inside them is too valuable not to.
Right, and we can now recycle, a huge amount of a battery. But I want to also shout out here, because this is another thing. Okay, it was a joke. Okay, it's very difficult though when you say things in a text format.
Yeah.
To infer whether someone was joking or not, especially if you don't put a smiley on the end.
Yeah, and there is a lot of weird misinformation. I had someone say earlier today that it's ridiculous that the administration's praising GM. It is. When GM makes cars in China and Tesla is an American manufacturer. And I want to be like, have you never heard of Giga Shanghai? Like, Giga Shanghai is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, Tesla makes factories in China.
Tesla builds lots of cars in China.
Yeah.
GM builds lots of cars in China. There's a lot you can compare the companies on and have when it comes to EVs and have GM come out worse. That's not one of them.
It's the same when people say, I'm not buying a Toyota because it's made in Japan. If you're buying a Toyota in North America,
it's almost certainly built here.
Probably made in the US.
I think there's a couple that aren't, but overwhelmingly, it'd be made here.
Yeah, most of them are made here. And as John says, Redwood Materials exists to recycle batteries, so this is going to be a win for somebody. It's not going to be
I actually think that it's possible, and I know it's hard to see here. I think it's possible that in the end, not for GM, but the Bolt battery debacle could be a net positive for the EV industry.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of companies really trying to ramp up battery recycling, but there just have not been enough EVs on the road yet for there to be mass need. Like I said, my car is 10 years old and it's still got its original 22 kilowatt hour battery pack.
Yeah.
Like, having the need to recycle 120,000 pretty high capacity lithium ion battery packs could do some really good things for pushing forward our battery recycling tech. I would love to see that be a silver lining on this dark cloud.
And we've got lots of companies that have been mentioned that are doing recycling, and I think more jokes because GM builds cars in the USA as well. I want to talk about another company that I feel is letting EV drivers down, and that's Nissan. So this is
really that's not where I thought you were going.
This is probably a story that you may not know, but I feel like we are going to try and do a proper video on it at some point. But it's come to our attention, and this is one. It's not wholly Nissan's fault, but it's Nissan plus politicians. Again, automakers plus politicians doesn't always mean good things. In Sri Lanka, there is a very large market for grey market imports. You know where this is going now, because I was on that road trip.
Now I know where this is going.
Came through. We got a message from a gentleman in Sri Lanka who told us that there is a big grey market in Sri Lanka for imported Nissan Leafs from Japan. Sri Lanka drives on the same side of the road as they do in Japan, so it's an obvious thing. It's a small island nation. It's a great way for Sri Lankans to get behind the wheel of an EV. But when it comes to batteries dying, which we know that Nissan Leaf batteries are not necessarily the most durable things on the planet.
Neither is tissue paper.
Right. We are starting to see those cars losing their batteries. Now, because of various regulatory constraints and because of politics and because of some pact that's been signed, it's very difficult, nay, almost impossible, to take replacement battery packs from Japan and import them into Sri Lanka. What you're then getting is that people have got these Leafs in Sri Lanka that they bought, but they can't get batteries for them. And so they're doing the only thing they can do.
They're doing ice conversions. And the one we saw was totally, honestly, beautifully executed.
It was.
It was so good.
It looked
I mean,
like
I hate it, but it was so good.
An internal combustion engine Leaf. And that is because they are being prevented from whatever reason. It's mainly political, but also Nissan is not helping, from importing Leaf batteries to Sri Lanka to replace them. Just as a reminder, because you've got lots of people jumping on, because it's just turned 6 on the West Coast, which means that a lot of people who maybe were still driving home from work when we started are now coming in and going, oh my gosh, Winter sounds different again. Winter made a video about 6 months ago about his accent.
I looked it up. It was 7.
7 months ago, about his accent and how it changes over time because Winter has Tourette.
And it's not an accent. I was really careful. I have been really careful since I started working here to say that it is not an accent. It's just a speech atypicality tick that kind of sounds like a British accent. And like all ticks with Tourette, it waxes and wanes. And in that particular tick's case, it tends to come for and stay for quite a while and then leave and be gone for a while. And it seems like it's going. I've been more and more American the last week. I'll probably slip back to being more British periodically for the next couple of months, and I'll just sound like this for a while. Hopefully the till will come back because I think my voice sounds better British.
What's the story with GM having a factory in the US? From what I've heard, the cars are only assembled there. How does this compare to, say, Tesla's US factories? Sparky Heart, that is a load of bovine byproduct.
I mean, to be fair, Tesla's American-built componentry level is higher than most cars. Tesla has percentage-wise more of its bits come from America. They're not all the bits in a Tesla come from America. I think it's like 70% American content. And I think most GM cars, I'm going to guess, is probably around 50 because that's pretty standard for the industry. But they do build cars here. And that's, I mean, all car manufacturing is assembling componentry these days.
Right. But I mean, the pressings are happening. I mean, it's not like, and I feel like I need to take umbrage with this because back when one of my favorite cars was made back in the 1960s, when Morris Minors were made, there was a concept called completely knocked down. And basically what would happen would be that cars would be shipped out to factories around the world in basically their raw components, and then when they arrived, they would be assembled. That is not the case for modern cars. However, we live in a global society, whether you like it or not. I happen to think that I am a global citizen, and I absolutely abhor nationalism. If you really want to piss me off, talk about nationalism, and I will quickly tear you down a thread. Because I grew up in the 1980s, I saw the Berlin Wall fall, and I hoped. Oh,
Hope. Remember Hope? Hope was cool.
And I'm now 42 and jaded. But CKD still happens in very small countries, says Cameron. You're totally right. It's less common than it once was, but that's not what we're talking about here. So anybody who tells you that, Ford and GM ship cars in from other countries and they're not really made in America, they're talking out of their bottom.
Well, there's always going to be some cross-platform cars. Like I have one of my closest friends drove a Saturn Astra for many, many, many years, which Kate was blown away to discover was a thing because the Saturn Astra
in this area.
The Saturn Astra was, of course, a Vauxhall Astra that just had a Saturn badge on it. But that was because of cross-platforming, and it was actually GM was building the Astra for Vauxhall at the time overseas.
Yep.
But
And
no,
there's some,
there was another comment I wanted to hit before it vanished. Where'd it go? How many Teslas caught fire? Kona, Bolt, a bunch of Konas caught fire. That's why they replaced all the batteries, or are replacing all the batteries. The Tesla Panasonic's 21700 cell for Tesla has been really, really good. Teslas still occasionally have fires, and Teslas have post-crash fires like some EVs do. But I think that that's awesome. I like the Astra. The Panasonic battery pack, the batteries that Panasonic makes for Tesla, the 21700 Panasonics have been brilliantly reliable. I like that my car has that. Someone said recently on a Tesla forum I was on, they were like, well, I won't buy a Tesla until the 4860s come out. And personally, I get that, but I'm like, I wouldn't buy a 4860 car till they've been on the road for a bit, because Tesla knows exactly what it's doing with these Panasonic cells. Someone asked a while ago if I would consider an LFP car. I would absolutely consider an LFP car. Personally, I would make some of the sacrifices for an LFP car. Probably not an LFP Tesla, because like I don't have any intention of replacing my Tesla anytime soon, my husband's Tesla anytime soon. But as other automakers, I mean, I've said previously on live streams that I would love an Aura Cat in my driveway.
right.
I live in America, so I can't, but that's an LFP car. And I think we're going to see continuing improvements in the LFP chemistries.
Yeah, and I think our future involves many awesome things. So I think the message here is not to get too worried or upset about what's going on, but we can call out car companies who are doing silly things, and we will continue to do that.
Does that mean that we get to rant for a minute about how awful Toyota's naming convention is? Because I want to cry. Yeah, I want to cry about the BZ4X. That's just...
You said Z. I got you to say Z.
I pretty much always say Z now. But yeah, no, and Toyota wants us to say Z, which we're not gonna do. But yeah, the BZ4X is just... It's just for a company that has a lot of work to do to convince people that they actually want people buying electric cars, giving your car a name that my dad is not going to be able to remember long enough to walk into your store and ask for it is really not good planning. It's absolutely awful. Someone asked,
like something straight out of anime, honestly.
Yeah, but not like good anime.
It sounds like it's it sounds like it's straight.
Yeah, the Toyota Evangelion would be a car I would rather buy. Someone asked why the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV isn't going to be sold, why GM doesn't sell that in America. Aside from it having very little range and Americans not liking city cars, I say it as someone who drives a city car, many Chinese market cars cannot pass anything approaching American safety standards.
Yep.
Like, just no.
And it's interesting. I just need to bring this up. I got an email from GM asking me to bring my 2020 Bolt in for programming update that will allow me to park in the garage again. My wife, Kate, got an email on Friday, and I got a message because I can't not work, right? So I'm at Anthro Northwest up in Seattle. I'm just about to go and do a panel on how to be heard through a fursuit head and how to speak and how to be, animated and all of that. And I got a message in the chat, the work chat. It was my wife saying to the other Kate and Winter and Erin, who were all still working, there's been an update. I've got an email. What should I, do you guys want to do a stream on it? And we decided not to. But interestingly, I have not had a notification yet. So it might be that my Bolt, maybe, fingers crossed, is going to get a battery soon.
Or it could just be that GM's messaging system sucks, which seems more likely to me. It is worth noting, though, that your wife, Kate, also got a message that she was not to, if she wanted to go to work, which she doesn't normally, she works from home, she was not welcome to bring her car to the company parking garage as things stood.
Well, it's slightly different. So my wife works she did work when we first moved back to America. She worked for a small consultancy firm, a small creative agency in Portland. They do programming. They did programming and kind of cool creative projects. They were acquired about 2 years ago. by a multinational company, and that multinational company has had 2 locations in Portland, the place that they used to have their studio space, and then another space, a more traditional office space. The studio had outdoor parking, but this new space, this other space where people who work at the same company that don't have anything to do with what she does park underground. And they sent around a message saying, if you work at this building, you cannot bring a bolt, or if you're coming to this building, you cannot bring a bolt. Now, her team that she works with are about to go and get a new building. They're going to move into a new building, and they are not allowed. And I don't know whether they're going to be allowed to. But I must admit, when I went to this convention the weekend, I was kind of nervous on the way up. It just hit me. I'm like, they have an underground parking garage. I might not be able to park there. And then I'm literally in the middle of downtown Seattle. Where am I going to be able to park my car? We are going to come to the end because we've been going for a while. But again, if you liked this, I think some people do like the format when there's 2 of us. We have some great videos coming up. We had a trip down to Southern California 2 weeks ago. We got back. And we have
what a trip that was.
What a trip that was.
A lot of miles in not a lot of days.
We pitted the we pitted the Tesla Model 3 with
my husband's Tesla Model 3, yep.
With vanilla autopilot against
nothing I own is vanilla, but
Ford,
yes.
A Ford Mustang Mach-E GT with Blue Cruise, and we had some very interesting results as a consequence.
We did.
The Twitter poll is incorrect. I'm not going to say any more.
There's a shocker.
There's a Twitter poll, but the Twitter poll was incorrect, and we asked who you think would win. The answer was predictable for both questions, and at least one of them was wrong.
Yeah. It was a really interesting trip, and it was a really, really interesting time comparing the two cars.
Exactly.
And I really enjoyed that trip actually made me fall back in love a little bit more with our Tesla.
Well, that's good, based on the opinions of everybody else.
Yep. No, not everybody else. No. I mean, there were other people in town who enjoyed our Tesla.
I enjoyed my time driving the Tesla. It reminded me why I liked the Model 3 so much when I test drove it a couple of years ago. We are.
I mean, I think my husband's car does show as being a little bit, I mean, the 4 years, things have changed in 4 years. Not that the car has worn down so much, but things have changed a lot in 4 years in EV tech. And now we need to do a serious comparison to my car and something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. There's only one thing Transfer Evolve access to that can compete with my car, and that's maybe the Varla scooter. I do want to drag race the Varla scooter in my car because I think my car will lose. It depends on what we're drag racing to.
So we have the Varla e-scooter. We've had it for a year. Varla's getting really ticked off with us. They're going, when
understandably, you sent us a scooter we're not allowed to use on the road.
They sent us a scooter that's not road legal.
Yeah.
And while we could take it out on the road, if we take it out on the road and film with it and something happens, then we are in a bit of a poopy state. I'm very glad that everybody enjoyed the update that Erin posted last week.
Mm-hmm.
She did amazingly well. Everybody liked
She's fun to film with too. I did the camera work for that. She's fun to film with.
And we get to introduce you to Michael next week. It's going to be the first thing that we're going to be doing with him. He recently lost his pride and joy. His car was totaled in an accident. And we may have got him into the fold.
Yes, there isn't a rule that to work at Transport Evolved you have to be queer or drive a plug-in car. It just does seem to happen.
It does happen rather a lot. And so I think we will leave it there. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/transport evolved, because Michael and the rest of the team need to eat. And just so that you know, I'm not paying myself for the rest of the year because
CES
new
happened.
coming on. We've got to raise money for CES. Literally, CES costs us about $5,000. By the time you've figured out hotels for the trip down, you've figured out food, you've figured out accommodation, because an Airbnb for like 3 people is okay, but an Airbnb for 5 or 6 people without asking your employees to sleep in the same bed with one another, which we all get on, but that's
not
kind
that
of one
well.
step
Yeah.
too far, and it would potentially open up the company to, you know, claims of sexual harassment.
And we're all longtime con people of one type or another, like conference people. So it's not like we're even super skittish about, oh, we might have to share a room. Like, we've all shared rooms with people before.
Yeah. I've shared rooms and I've shared beds with people before.
Yeah, I have too, actually. Not people I worked with.
And shared a bed with people in a non-relationship way. Yeah. You know, just say, I'm exhausted, see you tomorrow.
Yep. I have done that.
But not doing that on a
work trip. Reminder for people who don't want to do Patreon that
you can support us through Ko-fi. And look, Patreon do not take a large cut for what Patreon does. A lot of people say, oh, Patreon's fees are huge. Honestly, here's what Patreon does. Now, disclaimer, I am a Patreon ambassador, which means I'm a creator who has been with Patreon since its very early days. I am a cheerleader for what it does and what it's enabled us to do, because without Patreon, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Patreon takes taxes. So because of laws in many countries around the world, if you are offering a digital good or service, which Transport Evolved is, you have to pay taxes in that country. And especially in Europe, where there's a thing called VATMOS, which means if you're a Patreon supporter from Europe, some of the money that you are charged goes back to your home country as a tax. I have no control over that. In the US, some states require that sales tax is added on. And again, Patreon takes care of all of that. And a lot of the stuff that Patreon has done has enabled us to do. So they take care of that for you. Someone says, please don't talk over each other. I don't think we were just then.
No, Winter I was barking. I was barking, but I think I muted my mic first.
Yes, he did. He did. People saw your mouth moving. Reiterate, Winter has Tourette. He sometimes barks like a dog. It's one of his tics. It's no big deal.
But yes, people also can support us through Ko-fi, which uses the PayPal system, I think, if I recall. And you know, if you wanna send a messenger pigeon with just a check taped to its leg, we even have a PO box on our website that you can send, you know, cold hard cash to. I don't think you're supposed to send cash through the mail, but you can send a check.
Send a check. Yeah, don't be like your grandmother. Everyone has a grandmother who sends checks, who sends cash through the mail. Yeah, that's not necessarily good. And there is Bitcoin as well. We do have a Bitcoin wallet, and for those who are concerned, while Bitcoin does have a massive carbon footprint, so does every other banking institution in the world. Every banking institution, it's an unfortunate reality. We have a server at the house that is used for other things that when it is on, just updates our Bitcoin wallet, and then we turn it back off again. We run our house on solar panels during the day, and during the evening, we buy 100% green energy from our local utility company. And when our Transport Evolved truck arrives, hopefully we'll be running it off the truck at nighttime. Thank you, everybody. It's been fun. I can't give you the end credits because for some reason the computer wasn't letting me select it earlier, and it still isn't. So I need to reboot my system. We put in 160 terabytes of new hard drives today into both servers. So 80 and 72 terabytes of usable storage in one, 72 terabytes of usable storage in another. And so I think that probably
And
screwed the pooch a little bit.
in doing so, what percentage more space did we get on those massive servers?
I mean, our production server is now back up to about 2/3 full.
We were down to very little space.
The backup server had stopped backing up.
Yeah.
It was expensive. It was $3,000 for hard drives. And no, we can't use cloud-based services.
Not easy to back up 200 terabytes to the cloud, especially when you need to pull stuff down off it every day.
These, in case you don't know what these are, this is a SanDisk Ultra. It is a 1 terabyte SanDisk Ultra, and this one is a 500 gigabyte SanDisk Ultra. And we record, when we were at one of the companies, I nearly said the name, when we were at one of the companies we were filming at, Kate Walton Elliott was filming a 1-hour interview. It filled this up.
That's the 500 gig?
This is a 1
terabyte. The 1 terabyte, yeah.
It filled it up.
6K video, and that's without 6K. Audio.
Yeah. Oh, yes. We then have, this is a 64 gigabyte audio SSD card. These fill up really quickly too. That's why we have such good audio, because people already say we have really good quality audio. So we have now more than a half petabyte at the house. Just let that sink in.
Yeah, as a photographer, I thought that my 15 terabyte system was so much space, but then I came to work here and was like, oh no, that's like a week and a half.
Yeah, so those hard drives I just put in, they were each 16 terabytes.
Yeah, how many terabytes are we going to produce at CES this year, you think?
Well, we take a 36 terabyte portable and a 12 terabyte portable with us. So we'll probably create about 10 to 12 terabytes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot. CES is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot just as an entire thing. It's going to be a lot of storage. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of days. It's going to be a lot of footage.
He doesn't have a clue what this is going to be like. And Erin and Kate and I have been talking about this a lot. How do we make sure everybody is
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
So, thank you.
And we will see you soon. Keep evolving.
Keep evolving.